Hey guys, it's Cal from the Lighting Doctor here. Really excited to be shooting this video from probably my favorite city on the planet, Victoria on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada. Beauty is, weather's nice here, pretty much 12 months a year in relation to the rest of Canada anyway. So we're going to show you a bunch of different things on this project. We're not going over the top. It's not an overly big home, but we're going to show you some really cool ways to get the most bang for your buck out of using really a few of our staple lights, and primarily our up and accent light. We're going to use this in a lot of areas just to get some reflective light off a lot of features and trees and stuff that are here to highlight pathways and different garden areas without having to use a lot of path and area lights. We're also going to be using these as a down light to help create some functional lighting in some dark areas, some driveway areas. So we're going to show you some tree lighting tips as well as a bunch of other tips. So excited for this, shooting from Vancouver or Victoria on Vancouver Island, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. As I'm just going to walk you through the steps how we're going to go do this. It's the same as every project. Basically what I've done is I've kind of walked around, we figured out our plan, and all I've done is I've taken all my lights out of the boxes and I'm going and I'm just setting them all around the property so that I can do a proper count and also to figure out my wattage and how big a transformer I'm going to need. Now I have most of that already figured out, but I always want to double check because I just walked around with the homeowner and we said, you know what, we're going to add a light here, we're going to add a light here, we're going to take one out here, we're going to take one out there. So now I just want to go get them all out there so I know exactly what I'm dealing with. Now I can figure out my total wattage and I can go and calculate what size transformer I need, and I can go and get those in place. I'm going to go place those by the GFCI receptacles that I need so that once I've got all my lights placed, which is the next step, I'm going to go and actually take my little shovel, my mallet. I'm going to go place those lights where I think they're going to look best. Then the next step after that is I'm going to run out all my wire back to the transformer so I kind of have a path of where it's going, how much wire I'm going to need, and again to make sure I can size that transformer properly. From there, once I've got all my lights, all my wire laid out, that's when I go and I start hooking everything up, and I'm going to go start wiring all my lights in. And then from there, I'm going to set up my transformer, I'm going to plug it in, I'm going to wire them in, and I'm going to make sure all the lights are working before I go and bury anything. And then the last step after I come back tonight, because that's one thing that any good landscape lighting designer, especially if it's your first time, you're kind of do-it-yourself guy, you want to come back at night before you finalize everything and just make sure all your lights are in the right position and pointed where you need them to. That's why we always leave a little extra wire at every single light so that if you need to move it 6 feet here, 2 inches here, or whatever it might be, you have that extra room. So before you bury anything, go and test those lights, flick on your transformer, make sure they're working, come back at night, and then once you've got everything exactly where you want it, that's where the final step is. You come back, you bury all your wire. So that's the stages we're at right now. So I'm gonna go and get all those lights placed, then I'll show you guys some more details from there. So like I talk about in all my videos, the first step is I'm just gonna go place the lights. I've laid them out around the property. Now I just wanna dig them in and get them set so that I can come around and wire them. So how I'm gonna do that is I'm just gonna select my positioning, roughly where I want that light. I'm gonna dig a small hole, but I want it to be big enough that I can fit extra wire in. Like I said, when I come back at night, I might want to move this by a foot or two. So I want to have enough extra wire to do that. So I'm going to dig a hole big enough for that. I'm going to take my ground stake, place that in the ground, and then I'm just going to hammer it in with my rubber mallet. Just because I want to give it a little bit more security and keep it nice and stable. So I always do that, and that's all I'm doing at this stage. I'm just going to place them, get them secure so I can come around and wire them all up, and that's the first step. So I just want to show you, we're going to use our accent light a whole bunch in this property. In a lot of common areas we're going to use that is on some nice trees. We got a really nice tree here that we're going to try and focus on, but one thing I see people do too often, or more times than not, is instead of trying to get that light nice and close to the tree and having it shine up, so you're taking advantage of all the barking structure and then all the branching up top, is they'll bring it far back and try and aim it at the tree. And what happens there is they tend to miss a lot of the lower portions of the trees. And then also when it's, you know, depending on the area you live in, if you start losing a lot of foliage in the wintertime, then having that light shine at all the foliage is kind of a waste of time, and you lose a lot of the effect of that light. That's why I like having it closer to the tree. You know, here we're maybe 12, 14, 18 inches away from the base. We're gonna have it shooting almost straight up because I wanna highlight all this trunking and branching structure as possible, as well as now we're getting that light up into the foliage and into the canopy. So again, with our standard RS uplight from FX Luminaire, there's lots of other good ones out there. I like this guy because it's a real workhorse, and that's what we're going to use on this project. I'm just going to show you an area, an example where we would use an in-ground light. So we have these nice stone columns coming into the driveway area of this house, and sorry it's a little loud, it's a little windy, we're right by the roadway here, but bear with me. But entryways of driveways, entryways of the homes, you always want to try and feature those, especially, and typically you have some nice features like some stone pillars or something around the house, some nice columns or beams or something. You always want to try and get a light on that. So for this example, we're using our in-ground light. Reason being is because this is kind of a rock driveway area. I don't want to use a typical uplight and accent light, which will basically get you the same effect. The difference is I want the light source to start right at the ground, right at the base, and I don't want to have to worry about anybody from the street or any vehicles or anything knocking this over or hitting it or anything like that. So we're going to put this right in the ground. I've got it not too far back from the pillar. I've got it maybe, we'll call it 12 to 18 inches back of the pillar. It's going to be shining straight up. We're going to get this pillar as well as a lot of the foliage and the trees that are above. So these in-ground and accent lights, we don't use them all the time because they are a little bit more costly, a little bit more maintenance to keep clean, especially if you're in a leafy area. But in some cases, it's a great light to use, and that's where we're going to use it on this property. Now I'm going to show you some tree lighting examples and how we do that. Now I'm going to do it down low here. I've got my ladder. I'm going to go put it up in the tree, but it's tough to get my camera up there. So this is how we do it. We do it with these tree mount stakes, and the reason I like these is they're no maintenance. Sometimes you'll see people will mount lights to trees just using like a regular bracket, but what happens is as that tree grows, eventually it grows right over that bracket, right over the wire and all that. So I'm going to show you how to do this properly so that you don't have to worry about that. It's with these tree stakes. Super easy. See, the light screws actually into the top of here, and then this screws into our tree. So basically what I do is I just get it started with the hammer, get it in there a little bit, and then you can just use any screwdriver or anything. There's a little hole here, and you can just tighten that on. Keep spinning until you get it all the way in there. And the nice thing about that is now as the tree grows, it's easy to go and back that off. So as the tree starts getting wider and starts getting closer to the end, all you have to go do is do the opposite now, and you can just slowly back that off a little bit. So that's why I like that. Once you got it in there, pretty simple. Then your fixture is just a 1/2 inch thread, just pops in there and screws in. Now I don't have this all the way in, so it's not going to be super steady, but it'll give you the right idea. And then you just make your adjustments, shine it down. One thing I will say is anytime you're doing downlighting, something you do want to do is get one of these Hex Baffles. I don't know if you can see this little honeycomb. Sorry, this bee's bugging me here. This little honeycomb shaped filter. Basically what that does is this goes underneath the lens. And then now when that's shining down, it helps deflect the glare, because especially with downlights that are shining down, if you walk right under it or kind of in the proximity of it, sometimes it's shining right in your eye. What this does, it helps deflect that a little bit, so it's not as bright in your eye. And then lastly, the other question I get is how do you go and secure the wire to the tree? Because you can leave it just dangling like this, which is great, but then it's visible and people don't always like that. So how you can go secure that is actually just use these zip ties with screw holes in it. Again, another reason that we use those is because it's easy to go and back that screw off as that tree grows bigger, because so many times I see people who just screw the wire or staple it to the tree or something, and then within a year or two you can't find that wire anymore because the tree's grown right over it. Well, this eliminates that, and basically all you do now is you go and you screw that zip tie to the tree. And then you can go now, put the zip tie around the wire, and then you can secure it to the tree. But what it does too is not only does it keep it from the tree growing around it, but as that tree grows, now the wire has some play so it can grow with it. So at the base, anytime you do tree lighting, you want to leave a little bit of wire coiled up and buried so that tree can grow, and you just keep pulling that wire up. And if you need to, over time, you can back this off. That's how you keep lights in trees for a long, long time. And with the lights that we use, they're designed for that. They're not designed to only be up there for 3 to 5 years. They're designed to be up there for as long as you want them to. So that's how you go properly mount a light in a tree to get that cool downlighting effect we talk about all the time. So on this project, we're going to be mounting a lot of lights up in the trees and kind of downlighting, getting those lights up nice and high, 20, 25 feet up there, shining through the branches so we can kind of create some shadowing down on the ground here. So the thing with that is the wire for the fixtures we have is only, it's only about 10 feet long, so I don't want to have a big waterproof connector hanging halfway down the trees. One thing you can do if that's something you have is just go buy a junction box at you know, the Home Depot store or Lowe's or whatever it is, and just put that connection in one of those just so you don't have to look at it. At least it hides it. Another option that we often use is these shrink wrap connectors. Again, you can get them at any home improvement store. What I like about them is they are gel filled here, so once they get, sorry, bee on me here, but they are gel filled, so once they heat up, the gel actually seals around the connection, and they're very inconspicuous, so that's why I like using them. So we're going to use them for this. So I've got my wire to my fixture, so I want to make that a lot longer, and then I can make my connections down in the ground and stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I've got my wires, I'm just going to slide my tube on, because you need to get your tube on the wires first. So we got that on, and one thing I do is I cut, if you can see here, I cut one of them a little bit shorter than the other, and I'll show you why I do that. It's basically so I can cheat and just use one of these as opposed to having to use two, which same as any of the connections, usually you have to make two for each fixture because you have two wires, but we're going to cheat a little bit and I'll show you how. So basically what I've done is with my wire that's going out into the ground and my fixture wire, I have one longer and one shorter. So I'm going to take the longer one and I'm going to connect it with the shorter one. And I'm actually just going to twist tie those up, just twist them together nice and good, and then I'm going to just bend one of them so it kind of looks like this, right? I don't know if you can see that. So I've got it like this, and I've just got it bent, and then I'm going to twist the other two together, and I'll show you in a second why I do that. And then we're going to twist that, is so that I can go now and I can bend these like this, and the connections aren't going to be touching each other. See how they're separated? So they're not going to be touching each other inside the same shrink wrap connector. They're both in there, they're not touching. Something else you can do just to make sure is sometimes I'll put some electrical tape just around those just to make sure those connections don't touch, and then I'll go and I will shrink wrap that together. So how you do that is very simple, is you just need a torch of some kind, and then you just lightly warm that up, and you'll watch it shrink. You're going to be careful not to get too close and burn anything. Make sure all the wires are still inside. It's pretty hot afterwards, so give it a good little I just try and seal it up a bit, but you can see the ooze is kind of coming out a little bit, so it's all waterproofed in there, and once it solidifies, it's pretty hard and you are not pulling those wires apart. So if you're doing any tree lighting or need to hide some wire and extend it and make a pretty inconspicuous connection, shrink wrap connectors is a really good way to go. So we've ran all our wire to all our lights, but something I always talk about is leaving lots of extra wire. Even though I think this is where we're going to have this light tonight, when I come back at night, we might want to move it 2-3 feet that way or 4 feet this way or whatever. I've got 10 feet of extra wire around this, and that's standard what comes on this fixture, so you don't need that much, but even 2-3 extra feet of wire so that you have a little bit of play. And then also, if later down the road, because this is our last light on the line, say we wanted to add some more lights down the road there, well, I have a whole bunch of extra wire that I can tap into and I can keep my run going, assuming I have the right transformer and all that kind of stuff, which I'll talk about in a bit. But extra wire, extra wire, extra wire. It doesn't cost that much in relation to how much of a headache it's going to be if you don't leave it. So leave extra wire at every fixture, and even some spots along the way is going to save you a whole bunch of headaches if you ever have any ambitions of expanding. As I know it looks like I'm in the jungle, I'm not in the jungle. I'm still on a project here on Vancouver Island, hence you'll hear a lot of traffic still, so you'll know I'm not in the jungle. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more again about wiring. It is the question I get asked all the time, and like I've said in a lot of my videos, and if you want more detail on how to wire your lights, go to YouTube, search Lighting Doctor wiring diagram. There's a great video with some really good close-ups and explanations and stuff. But I'm just gonna show you a little bit more of a connector that I like using, these DBRY connectors, again, because like I say, with any connector you use, and I don't care what it is or what make or what brand, but it needs to have some waterproofing with some kind of gel-filled tube or something like that, and some kind of good mechanical connection that will keep the wires from pulling apart. That's why I like these. But you know, what I'm gonna show you here is what we call daisy chaining, because I always get asked, well, can I daisy chain, or do I got a hub method? And it's probably because you've watched a lot of videos that talked about halogen lighting, where you really had to be careful with voltage drop and all that kind of stuff. If you're using a good LED system, you're really not going to have to worry too much about that. So I usually tell people you can just go ahead and daisy chain. All that means is just wire your lights in sequence for whatever is the easiest possible for you. But then if you have one light or two lights or three lights off in the distance and you need to kind of tee a line out, you can do that too. And you don't really have to worry about voltage drop if you're using an LED system. So that's an example of kind of what we're going to do here. I've got my wire coming in from my last fixture, and then I've got my wires, my 12-2 wires going out to my next fixture, and then I need to run another line out to 3-4 lights out there. That's where I'm going to use these guys here. So how I do that is basically I take one wire from my last fixture coming in, and I take one of the 12-2 wires coming or going out to the next fixture. I'm gonna put those together, and then I'm gonna take my third wire that's going out to my other fixture. Again, there's gonna be two wires there, so I'm gonna take one of those, I'm gonna tie that in there, and actually I'm gonna cheat a little bit on this one because I've actually got another wire that I'm going to fit in there, and that's the beauty of these guys. Because they're bigger connectors, I can sometimes even put 4 wires in there, so I'm not only teeing off, I'm also doing it at a fixture. So I'm wiring a fixture in at the same time that I'm teeing off, because these are big enough to do that. And anytime you go to tee off, I always recommend trying to do it at a fixture or some kind of junction point, so that if there's ever an issue and those 3 lights aren't working and everything else is, I got a pretty good idea that this is going to be where my issue is, and I know where to find that connection, so I can go dig that up and check that out. So anyway, you basically screw that moret onto all those wires that we just put together. You slide them into the tube, push it all the way in so it gets all that gel, and then you just pull the wires apart, snap down the bottom of the tube so you hear that snap, and then it's good to go. And then you're going to do that with the other set of wires you have, your wire coming in, your 12 gauge wire coming in, your 12 gauge wire coming or going out, and then you've got your other wires. Again, same thing, 2 connections, wrap all those up, put on your moret, get that nice and tight, slide it into your waterproof gel-filled tube, and then just pull those wires together, snap down the bottom, and there you go. And I promise you, these wires are not coming apart. That's again why I like these. Waterproof, mechanical connection, they're not going to pull apart. Any wiring connections you use, that's what you got to do. This is how you tee off a line if you need to do that. Daisy chain if you can. Make your life as easy as possible. Install LED. Stay away from halogen. It just doesn't make sense anymore, and it will make your life a lot easier. So I'm going to try and show you a little wiring tip here, because this is a question I get all the time, and guys will hook up all their lights and they get to the and everything's working, and they hook up their last light and all of a sudden it's not working. And it's typically because that last fixture on the line seems to tends to give people some confusion. I can't even say it. So we're getting poured on here, but I'm going to show you the last fixture on the line here and how we're going to go and wire that. And if you want a better definition and diagram, go to YouTube, search Lighting Doctor wiring diagram, and I give you a really thorough example of this. But so I've got my last fixture right here, and I've got my 2 wires that come off of that fixture, right? And then I've got my 12-2 wire that is coming to the last fixture. So I don't have another wire going to another one. This is it. This is the end. So what most people do is they just end up using one connector and putting all the wires in, and then it shorts everything. So, but that's not how you do it. Even on this last fixture, you still need 2 of your connectors. So what you're going to do, again, you're going to have your 12-2 wire, and you're going to split that, and you're going to take one of those wires and you're going to throw it in the big port on your BVS-2 connectors, and then you're going to take one wire from your actual fixture and you're going to put it in one of the small ports on that same connector. So you're going to have, on the last fixture, you're going to have 1 extra hole for wire. You don't need to use that. You've only got 2 wires coming in. And then you need to do that one more time, because you still have another wire to from your fixture, and you still have another wire, another 12-2 wire coming in. So same thing. You're going to throw that 12-2 wire in the big port, and you are going to throw that small wire in the smaller port from your fixture, and then still at that last light you still have the 2 connections. The only difference with this and one in line is, one in line, that extra hole is going to have the 12-2 wire that goes out to your next light on both of these, right? Because this is our last fixture, you have that hole empty. So I like using these BVS-2 snap lock connectors. I also like using these DBRY connectors, which I talked a lot about, which same idea, except the only difference is the wires just screw into this moret, and this moret slides into this waterproofing tube. So it doesn't matter what you use, the big 2 things to keep in mind is, 1, some type of waterproofing. It's got to be gel filled of some sort. Those connectors that you buy at Home Depot and places like that that pierce the wire, stay away from those. If they have those connectors built right onto the fixture and you still want to use that fixture, cut them off and use a proper one that's got some kind of sealant in it to make that a waterproof connection, or I promise you, you'll be digging up that connection. And the other thing is something that has a mechanical connection. So what that means is something that will hold the wires from being pulled apart. These ones I like because they snap tight, and once the wires are in there, they don't come out. Same with these. Once you got the wires in there in these big gel-filled tubes and you snap this shut, you're not pulling the wires out of that. So some people will just use those gel-filled morets, which is fine. They have that waterproofing, but then you got to wrap them with tape or zip tie the wires together. Do something so you can't pull those wires together, or again, I promise you, you're going to be digging up down the road. So there's all kinds of other wire connectors that are out there, but they need those 2 components: waterproofing and that mechanical connection to keep those wires from coming apart. So hope that helps, and we'll move on to the next step after this. We're getting pretty close to getting wrapped up this project. We've got all our lights in. So basically, you know, our first step was we took a design and we went and chose all our lights. What was cool about this one is, you know, this is a client who actually had emailed in pictures for a free consultation, and because it was on Vancouver Island, we were able to do it. So we looked through all his pictures, we gave him some recommendations, and then we gave him a price to actually install it, which is not always the case because some of you guys are far away. I wish we could, but we just can't. But what was cool is then we got on site, and a lot of what we had determined from the pictures were very accurate. So we already had a pretty good idea of what we were going to do, how many lights, and we're able to size the transformers beforehand. But sometimes, and it is often the case, we get on site and there's some things we want to add or some things we want to take away. So so that's how we go and then determine our transformer. So we'll always try and determine that based on a design, but the key is just leave it a little bit bigger if you're not sure, because you always want to make sure you have enough room. And if you're using an LED system, it's not as crucial that you get it the exact transformer as when you had a halogen system. With a halogen system, you had transformers that had multiple taps, and you really had to be careful that you were getting the right voltage to the right lamps, or you were just going to burn them out a lot quicker. But if you're getting an LED system, a lot of times you'll see on the box it'll say that your LED is usually rated from 9 volts all the way to 15 volts, which means it's going to operate within that range, whereas halogens was usually between 11 and 12, so you really had to do your math. With LED, that eliminates a lot of that. So a general rule of thumb, and if you have more questions about sizing your transformer and voltage drop and all that, go to YouTube and just search lighting doctor voltage drop. There's a video where I go into a lot of detail and show you a chart and everything. But general rule of thumb, on 300 feet of wire, you can put up to 100 watts and not really have any voltage drop issues, as long as you're using a larger transformer like this that has a 15 volt tap, which means you're starting at 15 volts and all the way down the line you might get down to 10 volts, but that's still going to run that light, and it's still going to be as bright as it should because that bulb is rated from 9 to 15 volts. Again, assuming it's a good one. That's why we always say not all products are created equal, so you have to do some due diligence there. We do a lot of that in our kits, but just buyer beware. So basically, it's really simple to go and size your transformers. You take all your lights, you add up all the wattage of all the lights. So if you have a bunch of 5 watt up lights and you've got let's call it 20 of them, well that comes out to 100 watts. But you want to size that transformer a little bit larger, because depending on the efficiency of that bulb, the more efficient it is, the closer that actual wattage is going to be to 5 watts. But the least efficient or the lesser efficient bulbs are going to sometimes be almost 10 watts, even though the box says 10 watts, and that's something called their actual, it's called their VA, their actual wattage. So you got to be careful about that. That's why I always say size it a little bit more. But general rule of thumb, add up all your lights, and then size your transformer 20, 30, 40% more than that. If you don't want to have to worry about voltage drop, get a good transformer that has a 15 volt tap, and you can run 100 watts on 300 feet of line without running into that issue of losing any brightness at the end of the line. But that's basically it when it comes to a transformer. The only other thing I was going to mention is the timer options. Now, you see a lot of the dinosaur looking timers where it's this little digital or this little analog wheel that you got all these little tabs you got to stick out. They got these different digital timers that you got to be a rocket science to operate. The nice thing is that a transformer like this, we use one of these. It's from Wion. It's a Wi-Fi timer. But basically, there's dozens of these on the market, and if you have a smart home system, have a look if they already have an outdoor plug, because that's all this is. It's basically a Wi-Fi plug for outdoors, and all you have to do is, now when you go plug this transformer into your GFCI receptacle, all you're going to do is you're going to flip this into the on position. So you're just going to leave your transformer in all the time. But this little thing here, where usually you would have a photocell, which again I highly recommend against, because photocells just fail all the time. You have to have your transformer in the right position, because if it's in a dark shaded position, your lights are going to be on all the time. So all those kinds of things. But to get back to it, basically where it says to plug in your timer or your photocell or whatever, all you have to do is unplug that, plug in your Wi-Fi plug, whether that be this one or whether that be one based on the smart home system you have. Go and plug it into there, and then you plug this guy into your plug-in, and then you just close that up, leave it in the on position, and then you can go and operate everything from your Wi-Fi plug. And usually most of these, you don't need a hub anymore. They have their own app, so you can just go download it, and it usually walks you through how to do that in 2 or 3 steps, and all of a sudden now you have a Wi-Fi landscape lighting system, but you haven't paid tons and tons of money for it. Another thing that we do a lot of times, because I get asked all the time, well, in my front yard, my backyard, I want to be able to zone them different so I can turn them on at different times, kind of like a sprinkler system. There is some really good systems that are out there that do that. They tend to be quite costly. They're great systems, but it depends on your budget. If you don't want to do that and spend that kind of money on a system, just go and use a separate transformer. In this case, on this project, that's what we're doing. We've got one of these for the backyard and one for the front. Luckily, because we have this timer, we can run both those controllers on the exact same app and set them up with totally different schedules, which is what's cool about going and adding something like this to your transformers. And it doesn't have to be this one. It can be basically any outdoor Wi-Fi plug that you go plug into here is going to work. So make your life a lot easier. Turn your transformer into a Wi-Fi system, go and size it properly, be safe, build it, select it larger in case you want to add on down the road too. So hopefully that helps answer your transformer questions. But like I said, if you need more definition on voltage drop and stuff, go to YouTube and search voltage drop lighting doctor, and I guarantee you'll find something. So we've pretty much wrapped up our project. I hope you guys have enjoyed that and found these videos helpful. And again, landscape lighting is not that tough. I think anybody can do it. There's just a couple simple steps. I mean, obviously, get your design, figure out what you want. If you need help with that, that's why we do our free consultations. Just email me some pictures and I can help you find out what's going to work best on your property. We have our try it before you buy a light, where basically you can buy 1 or 2 fixtures, go plug them into a battery pack, walk around the property and see what's going to look good. So that's another tool to help you come up with the design. Once you got the design, you got your lights, then you just go and you set them around the property, go and place them, start placing them, get a rubber mallet, do that, run your wire, leave extra wire as much as possible, because you never know when you're gonna make mistakes or want to add on down the road. Go and make your wiring connections. Just be sure you have those 2 properties that we talked about, waterproofing and that mechanical connection, so they don't pull apart. Once you got them wired, go and set up your transformer, hook everything up, and go and test those lights. Fire it on, make sure they're all working before you go and bury everything. And my suggestion, especially if you haven't done this before, is come back that first night before you go and bury everything. Make sure you have all the lights where you want them placed. Make sure you're getting the look that you want, and once you do that, then come back the next day, bury all your wire. There's all kinds of other videos that we have on YouTube for how to bury the landscape lighting wire, how to tunnel under sidewalks, and so much more. If you have any questions about how to install your own landscape lighting, just go to YouTube and search lighting doctor, how to, whatever, and I guarantee you'll find it. So I hope you guys find that helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to get your free consultation and send me your pictures at cal@lightingdoctor.ca.